Actually to invite two titans that are holding our fintech ecosystem from two different angles, from business and regulatory. So I'm so happy to invite Vaiva Amulė, the head of Fintech Hub LT, and Martynas Pilkis, advisor to the board member at the Bank of Lithuania. And this is our first fireside chat today. So welcome, guys, on the stage, and huge applause.
This fireside chat hasn't been scripted at all, meaning that what is happening on the stage is for real. At the same time, disclaimer that me and probably Vaiva too, what we are saying is not, may or may not represent the official positions of our institutions today. So.
Very smart, very smart. Well, I'm going to try to represent the view of the members.
Anyway, before starting this, I would like to make this a light-hearted conversation, meaning not talking about little bits of digital data and about statistics, because for statistics we will have separate events. Next month we are presenting the big FinTech sector report 2022. So more statistics on the FinTech sector growth next month, but today it's more about attitude. And attitude, it's about people. So I want to share a couple of stories with you all about the real people who are ultimate beneficiaries or might be ultimate beneficiaries of fintech and financial services in Lithuania and abroad, and see what kind of lessons we can take from that and see what kind of questions we can answer. So I'd like to start this by telling a very short story about me, myself, going to work physically after a week of isolation yesterday morning. So it's 8 o'clock in the morning, it's pouring down, the heavy rainfall. I come to the central door of a central bank, and there is a Jewish rabbi with a big Porsche, big beard, and high, big black hat, standing right in front of the door, clearly waiting for somebody. And I'm saying, excuse me, sir, are you waiting to see somebody here, or you have some other issues maybe? And he says, I had to be in Lithuania in 2020 for the big conference of National Library of Lithuania and Bank of Lithuania, because I provided some of the very valuable Vilnius Gaon manuscript for the exhibition. And I should have received the commemorative collectible coin after this. But I was unable to come physically because of COVID, of course. And right now I'm here and I would like to get what is mine, you know? And I say, I know nothing about this, of course, but I'll do my best to help you. So I asked him to wait in our lobby, you know, because I cannot take him inside just right away. But I go inside the central bank and I'm making his case that he showed me. And we settled that we will sort it out in a time of 1 week. So the moral of the story is that sometimes, you know, it doesn't take too much scheduling. When you have your case and you want to be heard, you just have to come and you just have to present what is needed to be done. If you believe there was some wrongdoing, we don't need that, you know, petty bickering. So that's so good that we have an event like this today, and I would like that to celebrate that so much. And the very first question to Vaiva is, do you make yourself heard as an industry? Do you feel that way? Or there is, you know, just too much of petty bickering going on?
Well, I at least myself, I do say what I think. People know that. And I'm really very glad that you told that story. So that means I can ask the question I really care about without any cherry picking.
Yeah.
So you spoke about the people and about approach. So my question would be, we just heard the Šimkus publicly. We heard that the Bank of Lithuania is very friendly. And when the industry receives a lot of letter of expectations, many inspections, many requests to fill, to provide the data, and so on. Is that friendly?
Story time again. So the year is 2017, and I'm sitting in the town of Birštonas. And there is a civic society organized idea festival going on. And one of the main topics on the stage in financial technology, potential in Lithuania, which now we know, with a hindsight of 5 years, is huge, but the year is 2017. And Mr. Vitas Vasiliauskas, then chairman of board of Bank of Lithuania, is sitting on the stage and he is being asked a question, probably by some incumbent player in the industry, saying that, is it really fair that all the requirements for fintech players, new entrants into the industry, seems to be, for us, somewhat lower than for us, established incumbent players? Do you think this is fair, Mr. Chairman? And at that time, Mr. Vasiliauskas said that it's like comparing elephant to a fly, you know? You cannot compare and regulate an elephant and a small fly in the very same way. But that was 5 years ago. And the common sentiment about financial technologies industry and all the digitalization, it was somewhat different at that time. Nowadays, we see that there is lots of mingling and much less boundaries between traditional big players and fintech community, meaning that the regulatory requirements and approach is converging as well. It doesn't mean that we are, unfriendly as such to the fintech industry. It means that we are treating what is happening inside the digital world seriously, because digital world is taking much bigger part of what is financial services than it used to. And here I could tell another small story.
Too many stories.
Yeah, but to give a question to Vaiva. Yeah? So we would like to have very frictionless financial services across the digital world. At the same time, it poses certain risks. So personally, for the first time in my life, actually, this past weekend, I have fallen victim to fraud. And I have lost, at least as of now, I hope I'll recover that, a few €100, because some piece of my identity that I left back in the United States, when I left the United States, it was lost. So actually somebody used my old United States phone number to connect to one of the food delivery accounts, and they managed to compromise my bank account at the same time. So the lesson from that is that it doesn't matter how much you invest time and knowledge into being digital and financially savvy, it's still possible to fall victim to criminals, to fraudsters, to scammers. And the case is very complex because my card issuer is from one jurisdiction, payment platform is in another jurisdiction, and the food delivery platform is in a third jurisdiction. And the police and the jurisdiction systems, it all works in a very complex system. What kind of future do we see for things like this when it comes to regulating that without taking proper controls, for protecting consumers, for making everybody regulated in a proper way, and how could association positively contribute to that, Vaiva?
So you didn't answer my question, but that's okay. I would say we do contribute already. We try to communicate with regulator, we say the questions. Ask the questions, we sometimes get the answers. What I would add to the story you said, now we receive a lot of feedback, at least the industry players receiving a lot of feedback, what they should improve, what it's not good. While at the same time, we hear, okay, this company received a fine, this company received a fine, we know that we're gonna even have more inspection this year, but we never receive a good news. But we still know that we have a good news. Like we know that in 2020, one company didn't receive a fine after the inspection.
Congratulations.
But we don't know which one and what they did well, not to receive a fine. But we definitely know what not to do. So I guess it would help the industry to grow and improve the processes in terms of regulation and compliance by showing these good examples that if a company did this in a wrong way, you always say that this is the wrong way, but I'm sure that all the companies in our industry, they are trying to be compliant as much as possible. And while comparing with other countries, we can see that the regulator is not that strict, and I understand that Lithuania is trying to be the leader in this area, that's fine. But at the same time, in order for us to be the leader in the market, not just in Lithuania, we also need to make profit. Otherwise, we're not going to be leaders because we're not going to make money. So the guy you met yesterday asked you to get the coin, collective coin, yeah? So my kind of request would be, can the Bank of Lithuania provide the good examples and say loudly, publicly, not just to the company who was inspected, that this is good and you should take the example from this or that company?
I believe we can, and we are saying that, but this is also a legal question. So apart from all the stories and storytelling, if we may, we can go and dive deep into compliance and legal questions too. And when we look at anti-money laundering regulation and many other regulations, regulator and supervisor is not in a position to provide the one and true way for everybody to follow, because that's not how the legal system in those spheres works. So there are plenty of people from compliance in the audience, and you know that perfectly well, that what you need to do depends on your risk profile, it depends on our clients, it depends on your business model. So if I would say, please come somebody from supervisory department right now and say one and only true way to follow the rules, this is basically impossible. But that having been said, what we need to do and what we are truly trying to do is to establish informal formats, establish centers of excellence, so namely the AML Center of Excellence, which has been established by industry players, Ministry of Finance, and Bank of Lithuania, to provide some of the best guidances. But these cannot be prescriptive. And going back to the previous question, not to leave it unanswered, or the feeling that it hasn't been unanswered. So I don't want to keep talking and repeating the old talking points that has already been said during the welcoming speeches, but we are actually seeing growth of an industry. We are seeing tremendous growth in the licenses too, although not that fast and rapid as it used to be, but maybe for a good reason. We are seeing a big saturation in our talent industry, meaning that it's really difficult to get people. For example, inside Bank of Lithuania, I'm not only advisor to the board member, I'm also chairing the innovation committee for the recent half year. And during that half year, due to various reasons, almost half of my colleagues have left, and majority of them have actually joined fintech industry. So
yes, I have this question actually about the competencies, because I do also agree that this is the challenge now in Lithuania. We grew the competencies generally. We have more than a few thousand people who now understand what fintech is and can talk about it and do work in this industry, while at the same time, because the industry is growing so fast, we require another a few thousand people, and it's a challenge to create that competence. So my question is, what do the Bank of Lithuania do to ensure that you have a competence inside? Because these who supervise, they require a far higher competence comparing with what the industry has.
yeah, so the phenomena of people going into the supervisory positions and out of the supervisory positions after some time to work in the industry is nothing, phenomena only in Lithuania. So it's happening all across jurisdictions in Europe, United States, and so on. That having said, we are investing into our people competences. Right now, we are having a new training campaign being launched at the Bank of Lithuania. We have mentorship systems. We have a new approach towards developing certain centers of excellence, which Mr. Šimkus has talked about during his welcoming speech, meaning that, for example, this month we have established, and we will soon present publicly, the Center for Development of Financial Markets in Lithuania, meaning that we have people and we are growing people, competences of people inside our ranks. On the other hand, when we have a tough time in the job market, we need also to see what could be done to grow competences of ours. And I would like to see much more activities of association and academia and business community. So a very small story time again, just to keep this interesting. The year is 2021, and I'm sitting in the seminar about unbundling of financial markets with Cornell Law School professor. He is a rising star, Dan Orey. And we are discussing about payment system and about how to make the level playing field for not only banks and credit institutions, but also for various money transmitters, electronic money institutions, and whatnot. And to my surprise, after we are discussing maybe for a half an hour, he says, like, you know, I know Lithuania very well. I have been looking into your case, what you have done with central link payment system, what you have done to the booming growth of electronic money in the European Union. And he is so proficient to discuss these issues, you know, probably more so than absolute majority of people that I have met in our public institutions or in our academia. And the question is why? Do we invest ourselves enough to understand what's going on? Do we want to be only country with the front offices, so to say, having all the licenses and some people for compliance? What do we do to really get deep into the technical issues? What do we do to really create the future of finance in Lithuania? Not only, you know, to have these sweet numbers of licenses, which is good, but also to have the most cutting-edge technologies and products developed in Lithuania. Do we have good examples of that?
Well, I think the market matures, and we will have it more and more of these. But at the same time, then I think about the role of a regulator. In my understanding, the regulator shouldn't be the one who dictates to the market what they should do or what services they should create. And they should allow the companies to do the business and ensure that they don't do anything harmful to the society. While few weeks ago, the Bank of Lithuania announced a few new goals for this year. So they said that they're going to have more supervisions. They said that they want the industry to create more value to the customers. And it's nothing to do, and then to be the green. Let's make the fintech green. Well, it's nothing to do about the regulation. I mean, how can the regulator come and say, you know, we did the analysis, and I think that you do provide the services not the way you should provide the services, and you should make the services more effective or user-friendly. Well, I think the business knows what to do, and the regulator should allow the business to do the business. The same with green finance. Well, we all know that the green finance is a very trendy thing, but at the same time, the fintech is already green, or at least much greener comparing with other industries. And when I think about these new goals, I'm a bit afraid that the Bank of Lithuania or the regulator will come and say, you know, now you should do the KYC this way because it's more friendly for the customer, or you should change this, and then you also need to be green, so you need to, we recommend, and we know what the recommendation means by the regulator, do that and that.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
The recommendation?
Yes.
Well, if you don't follow, you are screwed.
No, I don't think so. It means that you need to make your case clear, and you need to make your case heard. And if you can succeed in that, you can come into the culture of dialogue. Because if we are, you know, only, you know, pushing each other or making snarky remarks at each other, this is not a way forward, in my opinion. So, and when it comes to the point about regulator telling companies what consumers should receive, so it's yes and no from my side, because it is up to companies to develop products, and it is up to companies to seize the opportunity, to seize the day, see the business opportunity, and use it to the maximum benefit. At the same time, it is duty and, you know, sacred duty of a regulator to take a deeper look, dig down a little bit, and see if everything is all right with the services being provided. So, for example, if we have a big number of people who are buying certain financial services or services related to financial services, and they are not understanding of what we are doing, we are not getting proper disclaims, they are being taken advantage because we don't have proper financial or digital literacy, let's say. Regulators should take a look into that and ensure, using behavioral economics, behavioral design of setting disclaimers and so on, that market participants are honestly and fairly including people into the financial products. Because laissez-faire, when you can do predatory lending, when you can do upselling and providing financial services are needed or even harmful to certain consumers, this is probably not the way forward. So I'm talking to lots of young people. So for example, just before Christmas, I met a young man who is studying renewable energy engineering, and on his free time, he is a gig economy worker. So again, something which was impossible when I was young and studying. And he's saving money, almost all of them that he receives, living very frugally, and investing that money, part of them, half of portfolio into cryptocurrencies, but actually not, the big cryptocurrencies, those altcoins. And the second half of that into some positions in the stock market, but not the broad index fund, but just very set in cherry-picking positions. Like super risky strategy, isn't that? And I think yesterday in the evening, before when I was preparing for this discussion, I checked some of his positions because he told me what he has invested in, and all of them, are going down, but more so than the market average these days, meaning that. Yes, we need to provide opportunities for people to be included, but we also need to do that on fair terms, which provide value for society at large. So that is my only concern here.
Well, I totally agree with you, and I think it's just finding the right balance between the being regulator and what the regulator needs and what the business wants, and kind of matching the goals at the same time. Well, to have a better financial literacy, you can reach in different ways. And by telling to the, don't you think that by telling to the companies that you should now teach your clients is kind of putting the responsibility on their shoulders instead of educating people at schools, universities, spending on the marketing campaign, and so on?
I mean, I'm not a very big fan, personally, that's a personal opinion, I'm not a very big fan of state institutions giving new responsibilities for business and putting all the compliance cost on the business. But we are seeing this all across the board. It's not only in AML, when the state is giving some of its responsibilities for market players. We have seen this very same playing out in COVID regulations. So the opportunity passport or green passport, so it has been an idea of the state, but the compliance cost has to be a burden for the private industry, so to say, all the inspections and so on. So what I'm saying here is that it depends, but this is a very big legal discussion about Western legal system and where we are headed to. These are not decisions being made by the government or policymakers or supervisors in Lithuania. This is, this is broad issues that we need to participate in, and we are participating in. And related question, because we are almost running out of time, I see, is how would fintech industry would respond, for example, if we would say, much less attention towards risk management, more laissez-faire approach, less strings attached from regulator. But at the very same time, you are in a position when all the passporting, which has been so important and actually cornerstone of fintech strategy in Lithuania, could be cancelled 5 years down the road. Do you see this as something that you entertain such an idea as an industry? Because this has already happened in another industry which is important to Lithuania. This is road freight transportation. Mm-hmm. So road freight transportation is a very big part of Lithuanian economy, much bigger than on other European Union member states. And because, so that's argument that I would like to propose for speculation a little bit. But because one might say that state institutions didn't control risk in the road freight transportation sector, so that risk has been taken at the highest levels in the European Union, and it has been regulated through mobility package in such a way, which is, it seems for now at least, which is potentially very harmful to the road freight transportation industry in Lithuania. And actually, Republic of Lithuania right now is in court at the European Union Court of Justice, making case against the mobility package, but our chances, together with some other member states, are rather slim, in my personal opinion. Because 5 years before, in 2016, 2017, 2015, we could have done something to regulate risk in the sector, which has been harmful on the European level. To some extent, I'm talking about social dumping, I'm talking about some other issues, but we didn't do it on time. So do we want the same story to play out in fintech industry and see the passporting regime gone or severely restricted?
Well, of course we don't, but I would say that both sides need to understand each other. And what I feel that the industry understand what the regulator wants, and then even when I said about the good examples, the good example could be that in this case, the company who did provide these services, this is a good example in that case. Meaning that the better the industry understands the approach or mindset of a regulator, the better they can come up with a good examples themselves. Regarding the balance, of course, we don't say that the regulator should step out and don't do anything, and we definitely all understand that the risk is very important, and to manage the risk is even far important. Well, at the same time, if we look at the examples in other countries, the big ones who have a lot of licenses, US or UK, the regulator there is slightly different. They don't do the every year supervision at the same company. They generally do far less supervisions for the fintechs, although they do have quite many ME licenses or specialized banking license, meaning that for the companies who have a license in these countries, they do feel the regulator is friendly, because they step by step allow the companies to learn about the risk management, while at the same allows them to breathe. While in Lithuania, it sometimes feels that we want to be so good leaders from all, like from regulatory ministries and the companies, but we all very kind of, let's just make it do, but not a very, the most effective way. And I would say if a regulator would help, and the industry itself would help, and that's what we do in an association, then to make profit. And instead of making the goal to be green, let's make the goal to be profitable. So we can pay more taxes, we could employ more employees, we could pay or buy them better trainings to grow their competence in the industry. And in this way, we will achieve far better results. What do you think?
Totally makes sense. And the principle of proportionality has been one of the cornerstones of a digital finance strategy in Lithuania and across the European Union from the very start of this. So the regulation cannot be undue burden without any consideration of the risk profile of a company, and I fully agree with that. On the other hand, it also needs to be said that if you are doing inspections in 2020 and 2021, and you see lots of smaller or bigger breaches of the law, so it means that you need to continue with the inspections. And later on, as you see the improved results of compliance in the industry, and I'm not saying that somebody is breaking the law, but you also need to do inspections to see how you can reach the compliance in the new sphere. For example, operational resilience, cybersecurity risk management has been of growing importance in regulation during the last couple of years. And we are also reflecting this in our activity as regulators and supervisors. So these inspections are fact-finding missions for us. It's not a mission to punish somebody. It's also fact-finding what's happening in the industry to get dialogue going on both ways. And when you see improved results, when you see high standards of compliance culture in place, you can reduce it over time, which I believe is what will happen. But I also don't want to be here making unfair comparisons between different regulators across different jurisdictions and the global regions of the world. So for example, UK has been mentioned here. We are in close contact with UK. We are part of GFIN, Global Financial Innovation Network, meaning that we are cooperating on innovation and digital sandboxes and whatnot on a weekly basis, basically. And what we also see that there are some, at the political and industry level, some bad-mouthing about regulator in UK as well. So there are some politicians from the ruling party in the United Kingdom this year saying that fintech industry used to be a flagship and we have been proud of our fintech industry. But now regulator is basically killing this industry with all the risk aversion that this regulator is doing. So it's not only about Lithuania. But we as regulators, we need to wise up, and I believe we have done that, because fintech is a much more important piece of financial services industries than it used to be 5 years ago. And we need to take that into consideration and make the fintech industry ready to withstand the challenges that society is going to give to us. Because what fintech industry is doing is a great change to society. But for some society members, this is utopian and a dream. For some other society members, this might seem dystopian, and we need to be ready for that.
So I can also conclude. I think the Bank of Lithuania and Pilkis receives a huge warm of applause, because in other countries, probably the head of association wouldn't be able to ask not prepared questions, wouldn't be able to ask the questions the way I asked. That already shows that the regulator is still willing to talk with us and still listens. And I think the more we talk, the better. So let's have more coffees together.
Thank you so much, Vaiva. It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Not so quickly, not so quickly. No.
Still?
I also have some unprepared questions that came from the audience. So the audience, thank you very much for, I feel like I need a seat, but I'll stand, sorry. Look at that. Thank you. Right, so thank you, audience, for being active and giving the questions. I have to warn, Martynas, you're going to be in the hot seat here, because there's quite a few questions for you as well. You sort of answered majority of them, perhaps, as a talking, so maybe just a quick brief again. So Karolis is asking about, I guess, the last topic that you spoke about. Regulatory environment in Lithuania is prescriptive and rule-based. What is your take on adopting a more risk-based, principle-based, robust regulatory approach?
Yeah, so, as I've said, proportionality in the regulatory of fintech industry, as in all the other industries which are a fast-paced environment, changing very quickly, having lots of innovations going on. So you cannot regulate everything in a rules-based approach. You need to have risk-based approach as well. So my personal take on that is that, and we also need to get this claim higher in the policymaking groups in Lithuania as well. So right now we have a structured dialogue going on. Many people from the industry, Vaiva is one of them, probably the most active, is in the fintech research group that Minister of Finance Skaiste has been telling you about during the welcoming speech. So you need to raise your concerns up. If you think and believe that the environment is too prescriptive, you need to raise this point. Having said that, again, in the legal world, in the regulatory world, there is a strong debate going on, and there are much stronger voices than 5 or 6 or 7 years ago that when it comes to fintech and financial innovation, we need to be more prescriptive. We need to have precautionary approach. So for example, I know PhD Professor Hillary Allen from the United States, and probably this month her new book is going into circulation publicly called Driverless Finance. And she's making a big case about why regulators are blind to all the risk and potential danger for consumers and for economy at macro scale from the fintech innovations. And we should treat fintech innovations as rigidly, as strictly as we are taking care of new drugs that are being introduced by Federal Drug Administration and so on. But just to illustrate that, it's not one-sided. So we need to listen to everybody And as regulators, and I believe those guys at Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Economy, you need to listen to both sides and hear all the arguments.
There was actually a question about that, how to find that sweet balance. And I think it's such a broad question. Someone asked, how to find that sweet balance between regulatory and business, that you could have another fireside chat about that, unless you have a very quick comment on that.
Well, I can. I think the regulators should understand that the companies themselves are not saying everything directly the way I do, because they depend on the regulator. So when you listen to the companies, you always need to read between lines to understand what exactly they say. Or if I or other association is saying, understand that I'm highlighting what they're saying to me.
Small remark. So if you want to have dialogue, you need somebody to talk to, meaning that in the fintech area, at the policymakers, regulators, supervisors, ministries, agencies, innovation agencies, we need to have people responsible for fintech. And now we don't have enough, that's my belief. And we don't have enough people in the association as well. So more staffing.
So you kind of almost maybe partially answered this question that was, we're talking about the maturity in the fintech industry, and the question was, will the Bank of Lithuania mature its approach and, the outcomes-based approach that will drive better outcomes for firms or customers? How is the Bank of Lithuania maturing?
Yeah, so my belief is that in order to be a successful organization, doesn't matter if private or public, you need to have learning organization approach. So you need to be constantly learning and growing, not only at an individual level, but at structural and macro level as a company or organization as well. So right before Christmas, we have made some structural organizational changes under the leadership of the new team of management. And right now we are learning the new roles and seeing the new benefits that we can derive from that. So,
there is a question about that as well. So the question is, with the new chairman of Bank of Lithuania, seems like the applicant numbers have dropped so rapidly. Is there a change in the fintech strategy, or is it just coincidence?
I wouldn't say that we have dropped. So we had a presentation on this very stage in the beginning of December, actually. Yeah. So I believe Lina has been leading the event, maybe. And chairman of Bank of Lithuania and board member, Mr. Krepšta, they have been showing us pictures from 2021, and the number of licenses issued hasn't significantly dropped. Although we also have to understand that the number of licenses per se, it's not a target, it cannot be a target per se.
Do you have a comment, Vaiva?
Well, I do. I mean, I want to know how you calculate the numbers, because I know that usually it takes a year to get a license. In 2020, we received 160 approximately applications. Well, last year we received only, the Bank of Lithuania issued 8 new EMI licenses and 4, I think, or 2 payment institution licenses. So comparing with the previous year when we had 13 EMI licenses and 4 payment institution licenses, which is comparing with what it was twice less.
Yeah,
so yes, I understand that the number is not important, but I think for the industry it would be very good to understand what type of criteria do you have, and I understand that the more applications you have, the more pickier you can be, which is totally understanding. But I think for industry it's very, very important to understand how do you choose which one is good one and what do you want to see.
So Bank of Lithuania is #1 regulator for electronic money institutions inside the European Union. We have the most experience when it comes to EMIs in the Union. What that means is that when you have new entrant coming to get a license in Lithuania and in the European Union, you can have more insight into the probability of his successful operation in Lithuania and European Union. So 5 years ago, we have much less experience. And as a learning organization, now when we have new entrants and newcomers, we see that many of the business plans and plans for operation in our country and in the European Union, it's unrealistic. And we can say, no, we have been there in the place that you want to go. And we see that this doesn't work. This is too optimistic. So you need to reconsider your business plan. And once you reconsider, maybe it doesn't make that much sense financially, because as Vaiva has very clearly said, profit is the #1 for the industry. So, that explains part of that.
I even heard the gossip that the Bank of Lithuania for this year seeks to reduce the number of ME licenses. What do you say about that?
I mean, I'm not in a position to comment upon rumors, but the decision needs to be based on arguments and principles based on the law, not on the rumors. So I do believe the colleagues are doing the very best of that. So if the number in itself is not a goal for Bank of Lithuania, it doesn't mean that we want to artificially somehow increase that, but it also means that we really do not want to artificially lower that. So.
Sounds like you'll have to continue that conversation a little bit later. We have 1 minute left, and I have 2 questions, so please be very short. About the laws, there's a question that requirements for business may only be set by laws. Why Bank of Lithuania does so by writing letters? And I will add on another question to this. What happens if you don't follow recommendations? 30 seconds for this answer.
Yeah, so I've spent the first semester of 2021 in Boston University at Boston Western Business School and at Boston School of Law. And I have been really very deep into advanced levels of financial regulation, fintech, and so on in the system of the United States. And we claim that other jurisdictions are only legislating by hard law, and Lithuania is legislating by letters. This claim is false, and it is false. So regulators in the United States and in other countries are also having formal and informal talks, various letters of intents, various letters to CEOs, and so on. So we can express certain expectations for CEOs and for companies, and we do so, and this is not out of line with what other regulators are doing across the globe. So.
Thank you. And the last question is going to be to Vaiva. For the finishing note, could you please name good examples of cooperation between the regulator and business?
For example, we do have quarterly meetings with FIU and Bank of Lithuania where we discuss the questions we have by the industry. So I do think that it's a very good example. Another one is the Fintech Guidelines Group, where both of the Bank of Lithuania, FIU, Ministry of Finance, all associations, participants from the industry are together creating the Fintech guidelines or the strategy for the next 5 years. This is, I think, the best cooperation you can see globally. I don't think that any of the companies have a possibility to get the touch to the strategy in UK or US. So I think the cooperation, although we do fight, because this is like, it wouldn't be very fun if we wouldn't, but the cooperation is very, very strong, I would say.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for those who last minute wrote questions. Unfortunately, we're out of time. But if the questions came from the audience, I suggest you stick for networking and ask live. All right, thank you very much, Vaiva.
Thank you so much.
Martynas. Thank you.
Take care.